We'll just go live. We're live now. But as I was explaining, Denisha, it was a pain to figure out how to get the Canon EOS M50 connected as like a webcam. It was really weird. Yeah, we could talk about it with Matthew later, but I was like buying all these connectors and I just could not figure out.
It was a process.
I kept buying the wrong dang thing. It was so stupid. But anyway, want to say thanks for coming out, Denisha, and to all the listeners. This is the Educational Freedom Institute podcast with co-hosts myself, Corey DeAngelis, and Matthew Nielsen, who is the co-founder of the Educational Freedom Institute podcast. We haven't done this podcast in several weeks, so I'm happy that people are tuning in to check out a very special guest who is a coworker of mine at the American Federation for Children, Denisha Merriweather. She is the Director of Public Relations and Content Marketing at the American Federation for Children. And Denisha, you're living in Florida as well. Matthew and I are super jealous, well, especially me, because I've been stuck in DC over the past year. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm super pumped.
Totally. Yeah. And Denisha, I think even though like things have been closed over the past year, within the past like month or two, we've seen each other on different trips in North Carolina and in Florida. I guess, a couple of times over the past month or two. So it's great to see you virtually. I'd rather be there in person to do this event, but hey, we'll take what we can get. So Denisha, could you give us a little bit of a background of what got you interested in school choice, maybe your school choice story, and then where you've kind of what has your trajectory been since first experiences with school choice?
Yeah, no, sure thing. I mean, I was thrust into this space of education reform, school choice. You know, I was not planning on making it a full-time gig, I would say. I never envisioned that I would be working for the education reform movement full-time. You know, a little bit about me, like you said, I grew up here in Florida. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and recently moved back. Very happy about it. And I was going to my neighborhood school from elementary to during my elementary school years, from K to 5th grade. And it was a place that I hated. I hated going to school. It was only reason why I went was my mom would go to jail. She went to jail maybe like 2-3 times for not sending us to school. And so I had to go, for that reason. But I definitely hated going to school. I failed the 3rd grade twice and was making D's and F's consistently. I was very disrespectful to my teachers, took no pride in how I looked, how I acted. And I came from a long family line of high school dropouts. And so education wasn't something that I necessarily found was valuable. And I didn't see the benefit in my community at all. And I would tell people, like, I think, I probably would have graduated. Maybe I probably would have graduated from high school and ended up working at a fast food restaurant. And I probably would have had a baby, and so it wouldn't have been any different from the environment where I grew up, but that didn't happen. I ended up graduating from high school, being the first in my family to do so, and going on to college, receiving a master's degree. And it was all because of school choice. I went to live with my godmother the summer before my 6th grade year. One of the first things she wanted to do was to find me a good school. And she found out about a private school, had no way to pay for it. And Florida has a scholarship program, one of the largest ones in the country. She applied for it. I got on, and my life changed. People would ask me all the time, like, who in your school has a success story, who turned around? And I was the poster kid for the school because I came in with so low functioning. I was not reading on level. I was not doing math. I didn't know my times table coming into the 6th grade. One of the teachers would meet with me during the summer and help me to try to get up to speed. I would cry, when the teacher would call on me to read. I would just break down and cry because it was just such a chore to try to get through a sentence, get through a paragraph they were so patient with me. It was such night and day. And that's how this all began. That's how I got involved in this conversation, because I was a beneficiary of it directly. And I noticed that now that I'm a beneficiary, I look at my community and I see that there are disparities. I see that my biological brothers, now my cousins, are not graduating. And I notice, like, well, how did I, graduate, and how did I have such a difference in my education, and even, beyond, and my siblings didn't. And so that's when the wheels got to turning. I got to be more engaged with the policy aspect of school choice. And I began to understand that the public school system is not what it's all cracked up to be, and how my personal experience, is not very unique at all, and how many students, especially African-American students in the country, are really falling through the cracks. And that's how it all began.
That's really cool. I got a question for you, Denisha. So you had, a couple. So first, what grades did that private school serve that you went to in 6th grade?
So K through 12. So I went to a private school that served grades K through 12. About 100 kids in the whole school.
Is that right?
Very small.
Very small. Okay, so that's interesting. And what was the series of events that got you? Because you kind of broadly went over how you got involved in the school choice thing, because you were kind of the poster child for the school. Tell us more about that. Like, what did that mean? Like, they had you at back to school night, or like how'd that start?
Yeah, well, my success was, I guess, so startling to everyone in the school. And I'm not going to say when I first got into the school, I was such a good kid. I was definitely on guard. I thought that when I was reading and out loud, that the students would laugh at me and pick at me for being 2 years older than everyone else. And that's what happened before. So I was really on defense. I came ready to fight and defend my honor, so to say. And so the teachers too, like I was, I had a very smart mouth, that's how we call it. And so when teachers would talk to me, they have to, kind of ease me down and say, wait a minute now, we're not, coming for you. This is just, calm down, Denisha. And, as the time went on, when I, came to the school, I tell people, I thought it was dumb. I thought I was stupid. I thought that I was incapable of learning. I did not have a very high self-esteem. And the first 9 weeks at this school, I went from making D's and F's to A's and B's. And so it was not even the case of like, oh, I'm dumb and stupid. It was like, I wasn't nurtured. I was not in an environment that was conducive for learning. Yeah. And I know no one took the time to even try to get to know me. And there's so many factors where, I felt, and on every level, not just academically, that it was a black and white, but even on the emotional level, on the social environment, everything was so different. And so they knew, right, from the beginning that, Denisha, definitely, we see the difference in this child. And she's a true example of, what we hope to accomplish with all students. And so, and I was very vocal about, some of the benefits and how they impacted my life. It was very startling to me that the teachers would hug me and smile at me. And so I would tell them that, like, you guys are weird. Like, hugging us after the first week of school, and you're smiling at us after the first week of school. What do you want? It was very like mistrust, trust. Like I had to make sure they were trustworthy. And so, and they were, but yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple times now that it was kind of like a shock going into the new environment. Is that because you experienced other, negative environments in the public school, and
for sure,
could you give us some examples of I don't know, something that a teacher might have done or another student might have done that kind of gave you that priming to react differently to the private school sector?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my family, the Merriweathers in Jacksonville, Florida, on the east side of Jacksonville, they've created a name for themselves. My family, I won't go into detail, but people knew the Merriweathers, and most of my family have caused a lot of havoc, on the east side of Jacksonville. And so all of those public schools that I would go into, they knew someone with my last name. And I remember very vividly, going into classrooms, and they would see my name, and I'd come through the door, Denisha Merriweather, and they would sigh like, another Merriweather, like, we have to deal with another one. And so it's just like, what? What does that even mean? So, and this was elementary school.
What did I do?
Yeah, it's like, what did I do? And I've already been held accountable for past transgressions of people I probably don't even know, and this is the standard that they've already, the expectation that they've already set for me, to be like other members of my family. And of course, after I failed the third grade twice, on the student end, like, I was picked on constantly, for being 2 grades older, 1 grade older, and 2 grades older. And so there was, the fact that I had to defend myself, with students, like, I'm not dumb. And I mentioned reading out loud, at the private school, but, I'll give you a little bit more detail. I would read out loud, and there was no time taken to try to help me get through sentences when I was going to my public school. They would just skip over me and say, okay, just, let's go to the next student, because I couldn't read through it. Well, at the private school, I couldn't read through the sentences, the paragraphs, and I would sit sobbing. The teacher wouldn't move. And at the time, I thought it was very cruel. But now I look back, it was actually building up my confidence, and no one laughed at me. It was building up my trust in the teacher, because every step of the way, every word that I stumbled over, she didn't just dismiss me and go to the next student who could read, she sat with, like, she would say, no, we're going to get through it, and you're going to finish your entire section, and then we'll, move to the next student. At the time, I thought it was the cruelest thing ever. But I'm thankful for it today. And I look back, and that's not something I got at my public school. I was always dismissed. And that was partly one of the reasons why I failed the third grade twice, because of the reading assessment. Couldn't pass it.
So I have 2 quick questions. It might not be a super quick response to either of the questions, but tell us a little more about your transition into the advocacy space, and maybe a little bit about your time at the Department of Education.
Yeah.
And then also, you just told us your story. Could you tell us a little bit about how you've gone to different state legislatures and told your story, maybe some of the reactions that you've gotten from either lawmakers or other people in the building when you give your story?
Yeah, so in Florida, the transition where I became more public with sharing my experience happened. So the Step Up for Students Scholarship, the program that I benefited from, where they were looking for success stories to help raise funds for the program in order to give out more scholarships to students. And I was a student identified by my school to, participate in this initiative. And I started going to, small donor events, sharing my experience to try to get more funds available for students to take advantage of the scholarship. And it was always an alter ego. It was always kind of something I did on the side, a lot because I kind of felt bad that my biological family, I was talking a lot about them. And so I felt a lot of guilt in that area. And so it was always something I kept on the side doing. Then, in 2010, the teachers union sued the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program. And it was a direct threat to me, to my siblings, and I was the MC for that event. So we held a big statewide rally of 10,000 parents and students. It was the biggest rally of parents in the state of Florida at the time. And I was the MC for that event, sharing my story on the national stage and introducing the governor. And along the way, I've had the opportunity to be present with Governor Charlie Crist, signed the expansion bill in Florida, allowing more students access to school choice scholarships in the state. And so each and every time I've just been, on the national stage, sharing my experience at the state level. I went to testify before the HELP committee when I was an undergrad and when I was in undergraduate school, and shared about my story, and with hopes that at the time the Help Committee would just, take up school choice. This was before the caucus was, we had the school choice caucus, and just, telling my experience to let there be known, like, hey, there's a need out there, and it's not unique to me. There are millions of other kids who are in school environments that are not benefiting them, and we should give them all the opportunity to go to another school. That kind of led and progressed into other things, going to various state legislatures to share about my story. And, I'll tell a quick story about, that time I did share it at the, before the Help Committee. Marsha Fudge, I never forget her, Representative Fudge. She is a Democrat, acknowledged my story and said, we're happy that your life changed. We love to see, students' life changed. But I can't support this because it's not going to help everyone. And, I'd say all of this because it's during this time of just sharing my experience, just sharing my story, I began to realize that the politics in school choice are very apparent, that the Republicans supported it and the Democrats didn't. And as a student learning that, I felt it was personally, I took it very personal, and especially in the state of Florida. I mentioned Governor Charlie Crist at the time. He was a Republican, and he signed the school choice expansion bill and said that he's going to give way more students in the state of Florida access to school choice. Well, the next time he ran as governor, he changed his party and he ran as a Democrat. And he said that they were pulling his arm, people who they were pulling his arm and saying that he had to do it, threatening him and stuff. And I was very confused because I was a high school student who he congratulated, and he looked me in the face, gave me the signing pen, and told me of, how he wants more kids to be just like me and have the same outcome that I did. And then he ran again as a Democrat. So I was very confused. And so I started to get more involved. Along the way, when I graduated from grad school, I got an opportunity to go work for Secretary DeVos at the federal level under the Trump administration, and champion for school choice there. And it was so amazing. Like, I thought that people didn't like it, that there were so many people who don't support choice. And it wasn't true. There is like this I don't know, it's like a messaging, that a lot of people, teacher unions, they have a lot of money, and there's a lot of money behind the marketing of people who don't support school choice. But at the granular level, people do support school choice. And so when I was working at the department, my job was to, as school choice liaison, collect and highlight and listen to the stories of parents and students and educators of who all benefit from school choice, and to put those stories out at the federal level. And I was very surprised that school choice is winning, and people love it.
It's the teacher union's own fault over the past year. That's the best part about it.
Yeah.
What's interesting, you said that representative had pointed out that, this program doesn't benefit all students, where, my first response to that is, one, competition does benefit all students, so you don't even have to use the program to benefit from it. But then two, if you were to turn around and say, okay, well, are you for a universal program that's for every single kid in the state? They would tell you, oh no, that's even worse. So they try to argue like to whatever sticks, they'll throw whatever at the wall and see what sticks. But could you talk about your time now at AFC, what you're doing at AFC, and then also you're the founder of Black Minds Matter, and that's kind of the title of our talk today. So we really want to get into what's the main idea behind Black Minds Matter, and why did you start it, and where is it going?
Yes. Yes, at AFC. So after I left the Department of Education under Secretary DeVos, I went to work for the American Federation for Children, where Corey and I are coworkers. And I absolutely love it. And so last year, at the peak of racial tension in America, everyone was really looking at, this, I'm talking about the protests and the murder of George Floyd, for all of those folks. And so everyone was, searching and trying to figure out, what institutions are we supporting? What systems are we, backing? And how can we fix racism in this country? How can we fix racial injustice and all these inequities? And, I was thinking about, of course, my own experience. I penned an op-ed called Black Minds Matter. And that's where it all began, really linking the institutional injustices of the criminal justice system and all of those that we see in the education system, and saying, like, look, people, they're not that different. They're not different at all. The same, police officers that are, they were slave patrollers in the beginning. That's how police officers in this country were created. And then you look at the education system and you think about the history of the education system and how it wasn't founded for Black people in America. It was founded for white boys, not even white women. And so when we look at all of the disparities within the education system, I really wanted people to see that these two systems, it seems they've had the slowest growth in America out of all the other systems. And maybe if we fix the educational inequalities, we won't have some of the other inequities that take place in America, especially with poverty and with people of color. And so that's where Black Minds Matter started, as an op-ed, drawing these lines. And we all said, at AFC, let's go a little bit deeper with this. And so I found, like, I went to a Black-owned school. I went to a private school in Jacksonville that was Black-owned. We started thinking more and more about that and saw that, wait a minute, we have something here. In order to be a Black-owned school, in order to have a school that's Black-owned, that's a school choice. That's a school of choice. It's either going to be a private school, it's going to be a charter school, it's going to be a homeschool co-op, a virtual option. Like, it's not going to be a traditional school. And so we created the first ever online directory of Black-owned and founded schools. And so right now we have a list of about 270 schools on the website. And these schools are operable because of choice programs. Most of the schools are in states that have some type of legislation that's passed that will give funding and support parents to choose the best schools for their kids. And so that's it's the winning message. We talk a lot as a society about empowering or empowerment in Black-owned businesses. And so I think about these Black-owned schools as a key message to that. And within the public education space, one of the biggest messaging points I like to see more people get behind is, within the traditional zone schools, the neighborhood schools, they always say, we want more Black teachers. We want more Black males, in the classroom teaching kids. And I want to push back and say, well, the true definition of empowerment is not just to get a Black teacher in your classroom. It's to actually empower Black people to own their own classrooms. And in order to go that step further is to, in turn, support school choice. And so the initiative has been it's been so much fun just to reframe the narrative in this way and talk about liberating minds and talking about owning your own schools and owning this Black-owned business and education entrepreneurship. It's really changing the mindset for a lot of people, and it's just been such a treat to work on. And we're nearing a year old, so coming up on a year anniversary, and so it's been really fun.
So my first reaction when I saw this is it seems like it's kind of related to Black Lives Matter, right? And then it's Black Minds Matter. Do you ever get into arguments with people who support Black Lives Matter, but then they don't support school choice? And do you send them this website, or have you had any of those conversations yet? It seems like it would be an awkward conversation.
Well, everything in school choice is awkward. We're kind of the middle child. We like fights and we like to not make people happy. But no, it is definitely like a cognitive dissonance, isn't that the word? People look at Black Minds Matter and they're like, wait, what's happening here? People on the Black Lives Matter space, actually the more liberal folks, they actually first, just because of the name, they're like, yes. And then it's like, this is school choice. And they're like, you tricked me.
Wait a second.
Yeah. And then, people on the other side, they're like, oh, no, we don't like Black Lives Matter. It's like, this is school choice. And like, oh, I love it. And so it's definitely causing a lot of cognitive dissonance within, on both sides, which I love because I'm a rebel. And I'm like, that's what we want. That's exactly what we want to happen. But surprisingly, there've been a lot of support just because of just how startling it is on both sides. I've seen so much. And so I definitely say there's support, there's opposition. Most of the opposition, though, is not necessarily coming because it's school choice. It's because it's Black Minds Matter. And most people that I'm seeing, online, they want, all life. Why does it have to be specific? Why does it have to be, us versus them type of situation? Why do you have a Black-owned school directory? So those are the more so the type of conversations that I'm seeing. But I think people are just getting caught up in the confusion of Black Minds Matter, Black Lives Matter. Yes, I support it. Yes, I don't support it. Wait, I do support.
They don't know what to do with it. I think that's the beauty of it all, though, right? Kayla Savadine had said she called it a mental double take.
Exactly.
I think that's why it's so catchy, though, and why people think about it a lot and are talking about it. I mean, you even had Scott Adams on his podcast, which he has over 600,000 followers on Twitter alone, and everybody watches his morning podcast. And I remember when he had mentioned you, I think I shared the clip of it because it's just amazing that people are noticing.
Yeah, I just got finished presenting Black Minds Matter to the Congressional School Choice Caucus, right before this interview. So it definitely has gained a lot of support. And it's just remarkable. It's kind of breathtaking.
So tell us a little bit more about that, the conversation you just had, and what was there? How did they receive it?
Oh, it was amazing. So I had Representative Brian Donalds on and Representative Burgess Owens on, talking about, school choice and just reframing the narrative. That's one of the selling points, that this is just a new tool in the tool chest, inviting people to use different language. Maybe we've, used up all of our traditional language when it comes to school choice, and maybe we need to say liberating Black minds, or education entrepreneurship. And so it was a real treat. Definitely those two congressmen are fantastic champions for education freedom. And it was a pleasure, presenting it to them. So went through the history of school choice, went through the history of Black Minds Matter, and how it's definitely here for their consumption. Went over your crime study, which I failed to mention. But one of the great selling points, it's, I look at my personal life and I'm like, I know what school choice did for me, and I know it's the same in my community. But to actually have a white paper and a peer-reviewed journal article and, on the effects of school choice as it relates to crime and vice and teen pregnancy and all of these other outcomes is so beneficial, because people from the top down look at the studies and they say, yeah, okay, it works. And so one of the, the studies that, I'm talking about is that school choice reduces crime. Students who participate in choice programs were less likely to end up in jail than students who didn't. And then a study out of Florida also found that students who graduated from choice programs were more likely to graduate from high school, go to college, and graduate from college than their public school counterparts. And so it's really encouraging, because those are the type of statistics that I love to hear about when it comes to the African American community. I hate hearing about the studies that say, like NAEP over and over again, 15 out of 100 Black kids are reading on level. 13 out of 100 are doing math on level. Like, that's not what I like to hear. Those are not. And then 70% of Black boys who don't graduate from high school are more likely to end up in prison. That's not what I like to hear. I like to hear reduces crime, more likely to graduate and go to college. And when school choice is in the picture, those are the stats that happen. And those are all of the messages that we champion under Black Minds Matter. And maybe if we had more school choice options, and I like to believe that it is definitely the case, then all of that generational poverty, all of the outcomes that we see, the just depressing outcomes when it comes to the Black community, will be largely eliminated when we invite school choice into the picture.
So would you say that a lot of the disparate impacts that we see in the traditional school system or the government school system are the result of public school systemic racism?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's a history. You see redlining, and that's literally the most racist thing that we are still doing in the 21st century. Like, people look at, the criminal justice system and they're like, we need reform. I'm like, do you see how we're zoning schools? Like, it's literally rooted in racism, and we haven't changed it at all. And so, no, I definitely agree with that. And you look at the school to prison pipeline. I've shared on Twitter, just call it the public school to prison pipeline, because when students are going to choice schools, they're not going to prison afterwards. They're going on to college. They're going on to work. It's only public schools, government schools, who are sending our kids straight into prison. And it's definitely rooted in racism, and it's very heartbreaking, and it makes me very angry that little has changed, and most people are not even upset, enraged as I am about it.
Well, it's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
I was just going to mention.
We both said it's interesting at the same time.
Yeah, you did.
By the way,
I'll finish your sentence, Corey. No, I was going to say, in Arizona, in this, I think it was in this session, actually, in this legislative session, legislators passed into statute, and I think it was subsequently signed by the governor. By the governor, I have to double check this, but they abolished school district boundaries altogether in the state of Arizona.
Wow,
which is pretty cool. And that, speaking of redlining, and the extremely insane history there with, the racist, obviously with redlining is racist. So blowing that up and just doing away with it completely is a good step in the right direction. So
Matthew,
you were going to say, Corey?
In Arizona, even if the district boundaries are erased, do you get a higher likelihood of getting into a school if you're already living next to the school? I think there's still some remnants of that left over, even if you have statewide open enrollment.
That's true. So we've always had statewide, well, always. For some years, we've had here in Arizona some open enrollment. Anyone could go to any school that they wanted. What this did is it said no one gets any preference anymore based on your proximity to the school. And
interesting.
So a lot of people were really upset about that.
But if you already have a seat, then you're not going to kick you out. So there's,
correct.
I guess that's more of a long-term thing that needs to change.
Yeah.
But what I was going to point out that I thought was interesting was, a lot of the people who tend to be on the left will agree that there are remnants of systemic racism in the traditional school system that cause disparate outcomes. Mm-hmm. I think where they disagree is they'll say, yeah, you're right, but school choice isn't the answer. We just need to fund every school equally, and if we just throw more money at it, then that's going to fix all the problems, because the issue isn't choice and opportunity. It's just the amount of resources. So, Denisha, what's your response to their proposed solution?
Yeah, I mean, we've dumped so much money into the public school system and nothing has happened. I mean, if you go to a Title I school, you're essentially getting way more money than a school that's not low income. And it's, just a profit off of Black and brown babies. Most Black students are more likely to go to high poverty schools, low performing high poverty schools than white students. And you get, I'm not going to go into the school funding model, but you essentially will get way more money if the school itself, if it's low performing and high poverty. And most of these schools are filled with Black and brown students. And so money is not the solution to the problem, especially when you see that private schools, charter schools are able to educate and graduate students at higher rates with lower, with not as many resources as public schools. Most of these schools are not even able to do sports programs and after school programs because they're so focused on academics and they don't have the money. But guess what? They're educating kids. They are graduating students. Whereas the public school system, you have everything you can imagine. Like, you're not even debating or trying to raise money to get a building. You have a building. And they're just not good stewards of resources. So I don't think that money is an issue. And it's the system itself is broken, in my opinion. The system is broken, and I'm not really waiting around to try to fix it. I'm not really advocating that we try to fix the public school system. We should definitely give students access to other school options because it's taken too long to try to fix. And students are, graduating every day. Students are going to the next grade level, and their lives are really at stake right now, and they don't have time to wait. And so I'm not really interested in trying to dump more money into the system or, give them any, I don't think I'm being unfair because they don't do it to schools of choice. They put schools on a very strict accountability, transparency on paper, and they hold schools of choice to very high standards they themselves don't hold themselves to. And so I'm not waiting around to try to fix
Denisha's not pulling any punches. But that's good. That's because it's true. I wanted to just put a finer point on that real quick, Denisha. You mentioned that Title I schools get more money. So we hear this all the time, and this was Corey's original question, but you brought up like a huge just torpedo for that argument, which is Title I, right? So when people say, well, more money would do it, like if we just funded the schools properly and appropriately, then of course that's going to make all the difference for the kids. They're going to learn more and they're going to graduate at a higher rate. But Title I is, and I don't know, Corey, do you know? And maybe you know, Denisha, I don't. When these studies come out, like there was the one that came out of Illinois, Corey, was it last year, where he was talking about school funding and saying, yeah, look at it, it affects achievement. I don't know if he talked about attainment, but it was Jackson. So,
and it was an Illinois-based study, not a nationwide study?
No, he's in Illinois. But did he contemplate Title I? Because
I don't remember
that he did. And this is to your point, Denisha. So when people make that argument, it's like, come on, guys. I get that you're advocating for more money for your funders and for your position, and fair enough. Like, you really believe that'll help, but Title I just torpedoes that argument.
Yeah, and then too, with the whole funding system, it's like most of the the averages. I don't know if they take into account all of the all of the incentive programs and the titles and even the state-based programs and the notches, the incentives. schools get, based on, different criteria. So if you have, IB and AP classes, and the percentage of students that pass those classes, you get more money. And so, but I like to think about it as, if I set down a 2-year-old and tried to teach them their ABCs, and instead of actually like sitting and taking time to go through the alphabet or even sing the little song, but I handed them $100 bill and said, okay, go ahead, here, ABCs, here, $100. Teach yourself, ABCs. It's like money is not going to fix that problem. You actually have to have someone who's effective at the job to actually teach the kid how to learn. And so just throwing a bunch of money at a situation is not the solution.
Yeah, you can spend $100,000 per kid and get the same outcomes if you don't have the incentives to spend the money wisely. And without choice, the incentives aren't aligned in the right way to cater to the needs of the customer. And then the other thing that just blows that narrative up is, why are there hundreds of thousands of families on wait lists to get their kids into charter schools, even though charter schools tend to get less funding on a per pupil basis than the traditional schools?
Yep.
If the money's such a great aspect and determining factor of whether the school is going to do a good job, then you want to have people flock into the charter schools. And then two, we have private school voucher programs that are drastically underfunded relative to their nearby traditional schools, yet you still have families flocking to those programs too. So
22%, and this study actually came out today real clear, 22% of Black people said that they would send their kid to a government school, to a traditional public school. Only 22%.
Which is a quarter of
everyone else.
The overall average.
Yep. Everyone else said, I would rather send my kids somewhere else. And so 22 said, okay, I'll stick with the public school system. No, everyone else said, I want to go somewhere. This
is why the union's so afraid. They know that 3 out of every 4 people will leave when given the option. That's why they try to make the argument that school choice will defund public schools. Well, why would it defund public schools if you're doing a good job? Well, they know they're not doing a good job. They know people are going to walk whenever they get the opportunity.
Within the African American community, I mean, people see, like, my schools are not performing well. My sister, cousin, brother, whatever, dropped out of school, are not, perform, can't do this, can't do that. The disparities are apparent within the African American community. And so the Black Minds Matter initiative is such on message, because people see, like, I see low income when I look at this school. And if you actually put on paper, you know that this school is getting on average $15,000 per student to educate kids.
What are you doing with that money?
Thank you. They're like, $15,000, that's more than I could ever make in a year. Like, I'm just, putting that out there. But yes, I mean, people are looking, like, I see what low income looks like. And this school looks like it's low income, but you're telling me that this school gets how much money per kid? And do I want my kid to go someplace else if I had the opportunity? Heck yes. And that's the winning message for school choice.
All right, Denisha, we're running up to a meeting that you have in a few minutes. So let's take it away with the number one message you want to get out to our listeners on the podcast today. Number one, closing thoughts, and then also where to follow your work, and any other information you'd like to leave us with.
Yes. Well, first, I have my Twitter handle on the screen. It's Denisha M. Weather, like Merriweather, but just M. Weather. And thanks to Corey, I am blowing up on Twitter, become the brand for Black Minds Matter. And so definitely follow me there. That's much appreciated. You can follow the movement Black Minds Matter at blackmindsmatter.net. Keep up with all of the latest happenings with Black Minds Matter. We interview every other month. We have founders interview Black-owned school founders, and so follow along their stories. There's some great champions. They're the boots on the ground who are doing the work. And if you're in the education reform space and you are looking for people to talk to interview, of course you can call on me, but I would definitely love to send you over to one of our Black-owned founders, because their message on ownership and education is something that's changing the narrative within the education freedom landscape. And so thanks so much, Matthew and Corey, for having me on. And yeah, just follow along, blackmindsmatter.net.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Denisha. For the listeners, again, our special guest was Denisha Merriweather, the Director of Public Relations and Content Marketing at the American Federation for Children. We discussed the organization she founded, Black Minds Matter. And again, this is the Educational Freedom Institute podcast, co-hosted by Matthew Nielsen and Corey DeAngelis. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you guys again next week.
Thanks, Denise.